I am Leah, 32 years old, a marketing specialist at what I thought was my dream tech company. 6 years of industry experience meant nothing when I returned from lunch to find a professionally printed loser sign taped to my monitor. The giggles around me confirmed it was no accident. My face burned, but I refused to react. Instead, I removed the sign, tucked it in my drawer, and continued working. They had no idea that this childish prank would trigger their professional downfall within 48 hours. If you want to know how I turned this humiliation into their worst nightmare without shedding a single tear, stick around. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up to workplace bullies. My journey to that horrible moment started with such promise. I graduated with a marketing degree from the University of Michigan, followed by an MBA 3 years later while working full-time. My previous position at Digital Marketing Solutions, a boutique agency with only 25 employees, had been incredibly fulfilling. I was valued there. My ideas, implemented, my contributions, recognized with 2 promotions in 4 years. When Horizon Tech Solutions, a mid-sized tech company with over 200 employees, recruited me with promises of career advancement and a 20% salary increase, it seemed like the perfect next step. The first 3 months at Horizon were positive. My immediate supervisor, Jessica Turner, the 38-year-old marketing director, initially seemed impressed by my portfolio and experience. She introduced me to the team with enthusiasm, highlighting my successful campaigns from my previous role. The office culture appeared vibrant and collaborative, with open-concept workspaces and regular team-building activities. My colleagues smiled and welcomed me, especially Brian Walters, the 35-year-old senior marketing manager who worked closely with Jessica and Amanda Fisher, another 29-year-old marketing specialist who had been with the company for 2 years. I threw myself into learning their systems and processes, staying late to ensure my work exceeded expectations. I brought homemade cookies to share, joined the company softball team despite my terrible athletic abilities, and volunteered for additional projects. I genuinely believed I was becoming part of the team. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags sooner. The first subtle signs appeared around my 4th month. I would walk into the break room to find conversations suddenly shifting or stopping entirely. Lunch invitations became less frequent than non-existent. In meetings, Jessica would ask everyone for input except me, or worse, dismiss my ideas, only to present them as her own weeks later. That approach is too risky for our client base, she told me, when I suggested a social media campaign targeting younger demographics for a client struggling with audience engagement. 3 weeks later, she presented an almost identical strategy as her innovative new direction and received praise from upper management. Amanda, who initially seemed friendly, began excluding me from email threads relevant to projects we both worked on. She would schedule meetings with clients when she knew I had other commitments, then report back that she had to take the lead, since Leah was unavailable. Tyler Davidson, the 42-year-old sales director whose office was adjacent to our department, became a surprising antagonist. He was known as the office gossip, and I often overheard him laughing with Jessica and Brian about the new girl who thinks she knows everything. His influence extended throughout the company, and I noticed other departments becoming colder toward me after he spent time with them. During this period, I learned something that would later prove crucial. Horizon had recently been acquired by Global Innovation Partners, a larger corporation with offices across the country. The acquisition was still in integration phase, with many of our policies being reviewed and updated to align with their corporate standards. This information came from Rachel, a quiet accountant who occasionally ate lunch with me when everyone else was too busy. Global Innovation Partners is really serious about their corporate culture, Rachel mentioned one day. They have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and harassment. My friend works at their headquarters, and she says they fired an entire management team at another subsidiary for covering up complaints. I nodded politely, not realizing how important this information would become. At that point, I was still trying to win over my colleagues through hard work and persistence, believing that the problem must be my failure to properly integrate into their established team. By my 6th month at Horizon, the subtle exclusion had evolved into blatant hostility. Jessica began assigning me the least desirable projects with impossible deadlines. While Amanda received high-profile clients and Brian handled innovative product launches, I was tasked with updating old marketing materials and managing social media for our least profitable clients. The situation reached a new low during our quarterly review meeting. I had worked overtime for 2 weeks on a rebranding campaign for Nexus Technologies, one of our struggling accounts. The client had been thrilled with my concept, sending an email commending my fresh approach and responsiveness. When it came time to present successful projects to the executive team, Jessica called on Amanda to present her work with Nexus Technologies. I watched in stunned silence as Amanda walked through my exact presentation using my slides, my graphics, and even my specific language about the strategy. When I made eye contact with her, she looked away quickly, a flush spreading across her cheeks. After the meeting, I confronted Jessica privately. "That was my Nexus campaign," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I designed every aspect of it and worked directly with the client." Jessica gave me a cold smile. "The team supports each other here, Leah. Everyone contributes, and we present as a unified department. You need to be less concerned about individual credit and more focused on team success." I left her office feeling completely invalidated. That afternoon, I discovered my desk had been moved from its place near the creative team to a corner location next to the supply closet. No one had informed me this was happening, and when I asked the office manager about it, she simply said, "Jessica approved the new seating chart last week." Brian and Tyler invented nicknames for me that spread through the office like wildfire. "Here comes Idea Island." Brian would stage whisper when I entered meetings, implying I was isolated and disconnected from the team. Tyler added to this by calling me Last Place Leah, within earshot, referencing both my physical desk location and my perceived status in the company hierarchy. Amanda took a different approach to undermining me. She began spreading rumors about my previous employment, suggesting I had been asked to leave rather than recruited away. "I have a friend at Digital Marketing Solutions," she told colleagues in the break room while I was getting coffee within earshot. Apparently, Leah had some issues with taking credit for other people's work there too. This was completely false, but by the time I could consider how to address it, the damage was done. Colleagues from other departments began canceling meetings with me, or insisting that Amanda join as well for continuity. The physical symptoms of stress became impossible to ignore. I developed insomnia, often lying awake, replaying humiliating moments from work, or rehearsing what I would say in upcoming meetings. I began experiencing anxiety attacks on Sunday evenings, knowing I had to return to the hostile environment the next day. I lost weight, my hair started thinning, and friends commented on my constant exhaustion. I considered quitting many times during this period. However, I had financial obligations that made unemployment a frightening prospect. My student loans, apartment lease, and car payments required the stability of my current salary. The job market in our city was competitive, and I knew finding a comparable position would take time I couldn't afford. In a desperate attempt to address the situation professionally, I scheduled a meeting with Melissa Parker, our human resources representative. I documented specific instances of exclusion, idea theft, and public humiliation, presenting them in a calm, factual manner. Melissa listened occasionally, taking notes, then sighed heavily. "Leah, what you are describing sounds like personality conflicts, not harassment," she concluded. "Strong personalities like Jessica and Brian can seem intimidating when you are new to a team. I suggest you focus on adapting to the company culture, rather than expecting it to change for you." I left her office feeling even more helpless. It became clear that HR was not going to intervene in what they perceived as normal office politics. What I did not know at the time was that Melissa and Jessica had been sorority sisters in college and maintained a close personal relationship outside of work. The final straw came during my 6th-month performance review. Jessica scheduled it for 7:30 in the morning, knowing I had a 45-minute commute that would require me to wake up at an unreasonable hour to arrive on time. When I entered the conference room, I found not just Jessica but also Brian and Tyler waiting. "We wanted additional perspectives on your integration with the team," Jessica explained, though none of them directly supervised my work. For the next hour, they criticized every aspect of my performance, from communication deficiencies to failure to embody company values. None of their examples included actual work product issues or missed deadlines. Instead, they focused on subjective assessments of my attitude and team spirit. "We have concerns about your future with Horizon," Jessica concluded. "You have 30 days to demonstrate significant improvement in these areas, or we will need to reevaluate your position." That evening, while working late to finish a project with an artificially tight deadline, I discovered something disturbing. While searching for templates in our shared drive, I found a folder containing performance improvement plans for 3 former employees. The language was eerily similar to what had been used in my review, suggesting a pattern of targeting and eliminating employees who did not fit into Jessica's inner circle. This revelation changed my perspective entirely. I was not imagining the hostility, nor was I its cause. I was simply the latest target in a systematic pattern of workplace bullying that had successfully driven away others before me. The morning of the incident began like any other, in my new normal of workplace isolation. I arrived early to prepare for a presentation on digital marketing trends that I was scheduled to deliver to our client services team. Although Jessica had initially tried to assign this task to Brian, the client services director specifically requested me, having been impressed by my analysis in a previous meeting. I spent the morning reviewing my slides and practicing my delivery, acutely aware that Jessica, Brian, and Amanda would be in the audience looking for any mistake they could use against me. At 11:30, I decided to take a quick lunch break before my 1 o'clock presentation. Rather than facing the awkward silence of the company break room, I walked to a small cafe 2 blocks away. The 15 minutes of fresh air and solitude felt like oxygen to a drowning person. I ordered my usual turkey sandwich and iced tea, found a quiet corner table, and practiced some breathing exercises I had learned from a stress management podcast. You can do this, I told myself. Just get through today's presentation, document everything, and start applying for new positions this weekend. I returned to the office with 20 minutes to spare before my presentation. As I approached my desk in the corner, I noticed several colleagues glancing in my direction and quickly looking away, poorly concealed smirks on their faces. When I reached my workstation, I immediately saw the cause of their amusement. Taped directly to the center of my computer monitor was a professionally printed sign in bold red letters, "Loser." The font was large and eye-catching, clearly visible to anyone walking past my desk. The sign was not hastily made, but carefully designed and printed on high-quality paper, suggesting premeditation and effort. The office fell silent for a brief moment, as everyone waited for my reaction, then erupted into poorly disguised laughter. The sound seemed to come from every direction, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. My face burned with humiliation, my heart racing so fast I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. For a moment, my vision tunneled the edges of my peripheral sight, darkening as I stared at that hateful word. I glanced up to see Amanda watching me from her desk, quickly averting her eyes when I caught her staring. A smirk played at the corner of her mouth before she ducked her head, pretending to focus on her screen. Jessica walked by, pausing briefly to look directly at me with a satisfied expression, before continuing to her office without comment. In that moment, a split-second decision formed in my mind. I would not give them what they wanted. They expected tears, a scene, an emotional breakdown that would confirm their narrative that I was unstable and difficult. Instead, I reached out with steady hands, carefully removed the sign, folded it precisely, and placed it in my desk drawer. Then I sat down and continued preparing for my presentation as if nothing had happened. The laughter gradually died down, replaced by confused whispers. This clearly wasn't the reaction they had anticipated. I could feel eyes on me as I worked, but I kept my expression neutral, my posture professional. Inside, I was shattered, but years of presenting to tough clients had taught me how to maintain a composed facade regardless of my internal state. From the neighboring cubicle, I overheard Brian murmuring to Tyler, "She finally got the message. She knows she's not wanted here." Tyler chuckled. "Jessica thinks she will quit by next week. No one stays after something like this." I continued working outwardly unfazed while my mind cataloged every word, every laugh, every participant in the day's humiliation. I delivered my presentation at 1 o'clock with perfect composure, answering questions thoughtfully and maintaining eye contact with even the most hostile audience members. Jessica sat in the back row, arms crossed, clearly disappointed by my professional performance. The afternoon dragged on, endlessly punctuated by sidelong glances and whispers whenever I moved through the office. By 5 o'clock, when I finally packed up to leave, the adrenaline that had carried me through the day began to fade, leaving me shaky and nauseous. I managed to walk calmly to my car before the first tears escaped. The drive home passed in a blur of traffic and suppressed emotion. Only when I locked my apartment door behind me did I finally allow myself to break down, sliding down against the wall as sobs racked my body. I cried for the career I thought I was building, for the professional respect I deserved, but had been denied for the basic human dignity that had been stripped from me by people who derived pleasure from cruelty. When the tears finally subsided, I was left with a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. This was not a situation I could fix through harder work or trying to fit in. This was systematic bullying designed to drive me out, and it had happened before to others. Instead of preparing dinner, I opened my laptop and began researching. First, I found the corporate website for Global Innovation Partners and carefully read through their ethics policies and mission statement. Their code of conduct explicitly prohibited harassment and bullying with clear definitions that precisely matched my experiences at Horizon. Next, I searched for former Horizon employees on professional networking sites. One name stood out: Rebecca Martinez, who had held my exact position before I was hired. Her profile indicated she had left Horizon 7 months ago and was still looking for a new position. On a hunch, I searched her name along with Horizon Tech Solutions and found a blog post she had written about toxic workplace experiences without naming the company directly. Her descriptions of isolation, sabotage, and public humiliation mirrored my own experiences with uncanny precision. As midnight approached, a strategy began forming in my mind. I would not quit. I would not file a complaint with Horizon's compromised HR department. I would go directly to the parent company with documented evidence of a pattern of harassment that violated their explicitly stated corporate values. The loser sign, now carefully preserved in my desk drawer, was no longer just an instrument of humiliation. It was the physical evidence I needed. I finally went to bed at 2 a.m, exhausted but resolute. For the first time in months, my path forward was clear. I arrived at the office the next morning at 7:15, knowing I would have at least 45 minutes alone before anyone else arrived. I brought with me a small digital camera, rather than relying on my phone wanting the highest quality images possible. First, I photographed my desk and its location relative to the rest of the office, documenting my physical isolation in the corner. Next, I retrieved the loser sign from my drawer and photographed it against the backdrop of my workstation, establishing context. I took multiple shots from different angles, ensuring that the quality and professional printing of the sign were clearly visible. After returning the sign to my drawer, I connected to the company network and began gathering digital evidence. I downloaded all emails where Jessica had dismissed my ideas, followed by presentations where those same concepts appeared under her name. I collected meeting invitations that had been sent to the entire team except me, project assignments, that demonstrated the pattern of giving me low-priority clients, and the documentation from my performance review with its subjective, non-specific criticisms. In the shared drive, I located the folder containing the performance improvement plans for former employees and copied those files as well, noting the striking similarities in language and accusations. I was careful to access only documents I had legitimate permission to view as part of my job function, avoiding anything that could be construed as unauthorized access. By 8:15, I had compiled a significant body of evidence. Other employees were beginning to arrive, so I closed all incriminating files and began my regular work routine. During my lunch break, I used my personal laptop at a coffee shop to continue my research. Global Innovation Partners had a dedicated ethics and compliance department led by Samantha Reynolds, whose email address I found through the corporate directory. Her professional biography emphasized her background in employment law and her commitment to maintaining ethical workplace standards across all subsidiary companies. I also researched Horizon's financial performance since Jessica had taken over the marketing department 3 years ago. Public information revealed a troubling pattern: rising employee turnover, declining client retention, and marketing campaign metrics that underperformed industry averages. These facts would help establish that the toxic culture was not just personally harmful, but damaging to business outcomes. That evening, I reached out to Rebecca Martinez through a professional networking message. Without revealing too much, I explained that I currently held her former position at Horizon and was experiencing difficulties with the team culture. To my surprise, she responded within an hour, offering her phone number and a time to talk. Our conversation that night was illuminating. Rebecca described a nearly identical experience to mine: initial welcome, followed by increasing isolation, sabotage of her work credit stolen for her ideas, and ultimately a campaign of humiliation that included similar pranks and public ridicule. The final straw for me was finding my personal belongings in the trash after I stepped out for lunch, Rebecca shared. When I asked about it in the team meeting, Jessica suggested I should be more careful about where I leave my things, and everyone laughed. I quit the next day. Rebecca put me in touch with two other former employees, Michael and Diana, who had similar stories. Neither had documented their experiences, thoroughly believing it was simply a toxic workplace they needed to escape. Both expressed regret that they hadn't taken more formal action against the harassment. Armed with this information and my collected evidence, I spent several hours drafting an email to Samantha Reynolds. I was meticulous in my approach, focusing on factual descriptions rather than emotional language. The subject line was direct: documented pattern of workplace harassment at Horizon Tech Solutions subsidiary requiring urgent investigation. The email began with a brief introduction of myself and my position, followed by a chronological account of the harassment with specific dates, names, and descriptions of incidents. I attached the photographic evidence of the loser sign, carefully selected emails, demonstrating exclusion and idea theft, and documentation of the performance review meeting that had included people with no supervisory relationship to me. I included quotes from my conversations with former employees who had experienced identical treatment, explaining that they were willing to provide formal statements if needed. I connected this pattern of behavior to specific violations of Global Innovation Partners' ethics policy, citing the relevant sections by number. Most importantly, I framed the issue not just as a personal grievance, but as a business concern. This persistent pattern of harassment has resulted in the loss of at least 3 talented marketing professionals in the past 18 months, contributing to Horizon's declining client retention rate and underperforming campaign metrics. The cost of continually recruiting and training new employees, combined with the loss of institutional knowledge and client relationships, directly impacts the return on Global Innovation Partners' investment in this subsidiary. I concluded with a respectful request for a confidential investigation, per the corporate ethics policy, offering my full cooperation and expressing my commitment to both the company's values and its business success. After reviewing the email multiple times for tone clarity and factual accuracy, I took a deep breath and clicked send at precisely 9:15 the next morning. The moment the email left my outbox, I felt a strange combination of terror and relief. There was no turning back now. The office that day maintained an eerie normalcy. Jessica seemed particularly satisfied with herself, making several pointed comments about team players during the morning meeting. Amanda avoided eye contact with me entirely, while Brian made a show of moving to the opposite side of the break room when I entered. I documented each interaction in a small notebook, maintaining my outward composure, while internally counting the minutes, until someone from corporate would respond. That evening, my phone rang at 6:30, displaying an unfamiliar number with the area code from Global Innovation Partners headquarters. It was Samantha Reynolds herself. "Miss Walsh, I have received your email and reviewed the evidence you provided." She began, her voice professionally neutral, but with an undertone of concern. "I want to assure you that we take these allegations extremely seriously. A team from Corporate Ethics and Human Resources will be arriving at Horizon tomorrow morning to begin a thorough investigation." She instructed me to continue my normal work routine and maintain confidentiality about the investigation. "Please document any further incidents that occur, but do not discuss this matter with colleagues. We will need to interview you privately as part of our process." For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking to anxiety. Whatever the outcome, I had taken action rather than allowing myself to be victimized further. The next chess move belonged to corporate. The atmosphere in the office changed dramatically when 3 unfamiliar faces arrived at 9 o'clock sharp the following morning. They moved with purpose through the reception area, their formal attire and serious expressions immediately setting off whispers among my colleagues. The leader of the group, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and impeccable posture, introduced herself to the receptionist as Samantha Reynolds, Head of Ethics and Compliance for Global Innovation Partners. Confusion spread quickly as an emergency management meeting was called. Jessica, Brian, and other department heads were summoned to the large conference room, while the rest of us tried to appear focused on our work while frantically messaging each other. "Who are those people from corporate? Why didn't we get any notice they were coming? Do you think this is about the merger rumors?" At 10:15, my desk phone rang. It was Samantha's assistant requesting my presence in the small conference room for what was described as a confidential discussion. As I walked across the office, I felt dozens of eyes tracking my movement. Jessica was still in the management meeting, but Amanda stared at me with naked suspicion as I passed her desk. The interview with Samantha and David Chen, Global's legal counsel, lasted nearly 2 hours. They recorded the conversation with my permission and asked me to walk through every incident in painstaking detail, from the subtle exclusion in my early days to the loser sign. They had printed copies of all the evidence I had sent, along with additional materials they had pulled from Horizon's servers overnight. When you returned to your desk after lunch and found the sign, did anyone directly acknowledge it or take credit for placing it there? David asked. No one claimed responsibility directly, I explained. But Amanda was watching for my reaction, and Jessica walked by with what I can only describe as a satisfied expression. And you said Melissa Parker from HR dismissed your previous concerns as personality conflicts, Samantha confirmed, making notes on her tablet. Yes. She suggested I needed to adapt to the company culture, rather than expecting it to change. When I returned to the main office, the management meeting had ended. Jessica stood by her office door, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, her complexion noticeably pale. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed, and she changed direction to intercept me in the break room. What did they want with you? She demanded in a harsh whisper, blocking my path to the coffee machine. I maintained calm eye contact. The same thing they wanted with you, I imagine. Information. Her perfectly manicured finger jabbed toward my face. If you think running to corporate with tails will save your job, you're sadly mistaken. When this blows over, you will regret making enemies here. I simply smiled slightly and replied, Documentation is such an important business skill. Don't you agree, Jessica? Excuse me, I need to get back to work. The color drained from her face as I stepped around her and returned to my desk. Whether she was connecting the dots about my email to corporate or wondering what evidence I might have preserved, her confidence had clearly been shaken. Throughout the afternoon, the pattern repeated itself. Brian was called for an interview, returning 40 minutes later, looking visibly shaken. Amanda went next, emerging with red-rimmed eyes and immediately grabbing her purse to rush to the restroom. Even Tyler was summoned, his usual swagger notably diminished when he returned to his office and closed the door. At 3 o'clock, an office-wide email arrived from Samantha Reynolds announcing a comprehensive culture assessment at Horizon. The message explained that Global Innovation Partners was committed to ensuring all subsidiaries maintained the highest ethical standards and positive work environments. All employees would be required to complete anonymous surveys about their experiences and observations of the workplace culture. The surveys were distributed electronically an hour later. I completed mine, truthfully describing both my personal experiences and the patterns I had observed affecting others. As I submitted my responses, I noticed Amanda and Brian huddled in intense conversation by the elevators, both looking extremely worried. Melissa from HR spent the afternoon frantically pulling files and making phone calls behind her closed office door. Through the glass wall, I could see her gesturing emphatically during what appeared to be a heated conversation. When Tyler approached her office, she waved him away without even opening the door. By the end of the day, Jessica, Brian, and Amanda had formed a tight cluster in the corner of the break room, speaking in urgent whispers that ceased immediately when anyone else approached. The power dynamic had shifted tangibly in less than 8 hours. The second day of the investigation brought individual interviews with every team member. People emerged from these sessions with varying expressions. Some looked relieved, others worried, and a few seemed outright panicked. The corporate team worked methodically, cross-referencing statements and occasionally returning to previous interviewees with follow-up questions. During my lunch break, I noticed Jessica frantically working at her computer. When Samantha's assistant approached her office, Jessica quickly minimized whatever she had been doing. An hour later, the corporate IT director sent an office-wide email announcing a comprehensive audit of the email server as part of standard merger integration protocols, requesting that no one delete any communications until further notice. The announcement visibly distressed Jessica, who immediately closed her office door and pulled the blinds. Brian spent the afternoon updating his resume, poorly concealed on his second monitor, while Amanda made a surprising approach to my desk mid-afternoon. Leah, I just wanted to say that I am sorry if anything I have done made you uncomfortable, she said, her voice low, and her eyes darting around to see who might be watching this interaction. I was just following the team culture that was already established. I acknowledged her words with a nod but offered no absolution. Thank you for sharing that perspective with me, Amanda. I am sure you have shared the same insights with the corporate team. Her forced smile faltered as she realized I was neither accepting her apology nor engaging in damage control collusion. She retreated quickly to her desk, immediately picking up her phone. At 4:30, Samantha Reynolds called another all-hands meeting. Her expression was grave as she addressed the assembled staff. Thank you all for your cooperation during this assessment. Based on our preliminary findings, there will be some organizational changes effective immediately. You will receive additional information from your department heads tomorrow morning. Global Innovation Partners is committed to creating a workplace free from harassment, bullying, and retaliation in alignment with our core values and ethics policy. As we filed out of the conference room, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Change was coming, and for those who had participated in or enabled the toxic culture, that change would not be welcome. The following morning began with an announcement that Jessica had been placed on administrative leave pending the completion of the investigation. Patricia Morgan, a senior director from Global Innovation Partners, would serve as interim marketing director. The news spread through the office like wildfire, creating an atmosphere of stunned silence punctuated by urgent whispers. Brian's reaction was particularly telling. By 9:30, he had removed all personal photos of himself with Jessica from his desk and was loudly proclaiming to anyone who would listen that he had always had concerns about her management style, but had been afraid to speak up. This sudden reversal from one of Jessica's most loyal supporters drew skeptical looks from colleagues who had witnessed his active participation in the bullying. Amanda spent most of the morning in tears, alternating between hiding in the bathroom and sitting at her desk staring blankly at her screen. When Patricia Morgan requested a meeting with her at 11, she looked as though she might faint. She returned 30 minutes later, her face blotchy and her hands shaking as she immediately began cleaning out her desk drawers. Tyler, ever the political weather vane, stopped by my desk with a coffee and an insincere smile. I always thought you got a raw deal around here, he offered, as if we had not been adversaries for months. If there is anything I can do to help during this transition, just let me know. I thanked him politely, but briefly noting how quickly alliances shifted when power structures changed. His transparent attempt at realignment was almost amusing, considering I had heard him coin the nickname Last Place Leah just weeks earlier. Patricia Morgan requested a one-on-one meeting with me that afternoon. Unlike the intimidating performance review with Jessica, this conversation took place in a small conference room with the door open. Patricia's approach was direct but respectful. First, I want to acknowledge that you handled a difficult situation with remarkable professionalism, she began. The evidence you provided was comprehensive and focused on patterns rather than personalities, which helped us identify systemic issues. She explained that the investigation had uncovered numerous ethics violations, including deliberate sabotage of work products, falsified performance reviews, and coordinated harassment campaigns against multiple employees over several years. Global Innovation Partners acquired Horizon because of its market position and client relationships, not to inherit a toxic culture that drives away talent, Patricia continued. We are implementing immediate changes to address these issues, and I would like your input on rebuilding the marketing team's morale and processes. For the first time in months, my professional opinion was being valued, rather than undermined. I shared my thoughts on team structure, communication protocols, and project assignment transparency. Patricia took notes and asked thoughtful follow-up questions, treating me as a valuable contributor rather than an unwelcome outsider. At the end of our meeting, she mentioned that several projects I had initiated but been removed from would now return to my portfolio. Your campaign concepts for Nexus Technologies were excellent, she noted. The client specifically asked about reconnecting with you after some confusion about who was managing their account. The following day, an office-wide meeting was called to address the investigation findings and next steps. Patricia and Samantha co-presented with David from legal standing nearby. The message was unequivocal. Global Innovation Partners had discovered serious ethical violations that contradicted their core values and would not be tolerated. Effective immediately, we are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment, bullying, and retaliation, Samantha announced. All employees will participate in mandatory training on professional workplace conduct, and new reporting mechanisms are being established to ensure concerns can be raised safely and addressed promptly. Without naming specific individuals, she made it clear that appropriate actions were being taken with those found to have violated company policies. The room was silent, the atmosphere heavy, with the understanding that significant consequences were already in motion. 1 week after the investigation began, Jessica was officially terminated with cause. She arrived with a lawyer to collect her personal belongings, escorted by security throughout the process. As she carried her box past my desk, our eyes met briefly. The hatred in her gaze was palpable, but so was something else, fear. Her professional reputation was now irreparably damaged by a termination for cause related to harassment. Brian received a final warning and demotion, removing his supervisory responsibilities and placing him on probation for 6 months. His office was reassigned to a new team lead, brought in from another division, and he was moved to a cubicle in the general work area. His reduced status physically manifested in his workspace. Amanda was transferred to the customer service department with a probationary period of 3 months and mandatory coaching on professional conduct. The lateral move was clearly a second chance rather than a promotion, and her subdued demeanor suggested she understood how narrowly she had avoided termination. Tyler's role as sales director remained intact, but his influence was significantly diminished. The investigation had revealed his role in spreading gossip and enabling the toxic environment, resulting in a formal reprimand and removal from several cross-functional committees he had previously chaired. Over the following weeks, colleagues who had previously avoided me began stopping by my desk or joining me for lunch. Some offered awkward apologies for not speaking up sooner or for participating in my isolation. "I was afraid of becoming a target myself," admitted Rachel from accounting. "I should have said something when I saw how they were treating you." I accepted these overtures with grace, but maintained appropriate professional boundaries. Trust once broken could not be instantly restored, but I saw no benefit in continuing cycles of exclusion. Patricia asked me to lead a key project developing new marketing strategies for our top 5 clients, effectively promoting me without changing my title. In our weekly check-ins, she consistently acknowledged my contributions and provided constructive feedback focused on professional growth rather than personal criticism. 3 months after the investigation, I overheard Brian talking on his personal phone during lunch, accepting a position at a much smaller company with a significantly lower title than he had held before his demotion. Amanda continued her probationary period in customer service, her previous ambition replaced by a nervous desire to simply maintain employment. Most satisfying was learning through industry contacts that Jessica had been struggling to find new employment. Her termination for cause related to harassment had made her toxic to potential employers, particularly as companies became increasingly concerned about workplace culture and liability. She eventually took a position at a tiny startup for less than half her previous salary, her career trajectory permanently altered. Global innovation partners implemented company-wide changes based on what they had discovered at Horizon. A new anonymous ethics hotline was established, reporting directly to corporate rather than local HR. Mandatory training on harassment and bullying was instituted for all employees with additional modules for managers. Performance reviews were standardized and required multiple inputs to prevent the kind of targeted criticism I had experienced. 6 months after the Lozer sign incident, I was officially promoted to Senior Marketing Specialist with a 15% salary increase and expanded responsibilities. The promotion announcement cited my exceptional campaign performance and contribution to positive team culture as key factors in the decision. The marketing department, now under Patricia's leadership, had transformed from a fear-based hierarchy to a collaborative team where ideas were evaluated on merit rather than source. New hires brought fresh perspectives, and longtime employees who had been silenced under the previous regime began contributing more actively. The ultimate validation came when I was invited to join a corporate task force on workplace culture, sharing my experiences and recommendations to help prevent similar situations across the organization. What had begun as a humiliating attack had become the catalyst for positive change far beyond my individual situation. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, no longer relegated to the corner by the supply closet. My promotion to Senior Marketing Specialist came with not only a salary increase, but also this small but significant space, with a door I could close when needed. On my desk sat a framed certificate from Global Innovation Partners' annual awards ceremony, recognizing my work on the Nexus Technologies campaign that had once been stolen from me. The marketing department had transformed almost completely. Of the original team that had participated in my harassment, only 2 junior members remained, both of whom had apologized sincerely and demonstrated changed behavior. Patricia had accepted a permanent position as marketing director, bringing her collaborative leadership style and emphasis on ethical conduct to our daily operations. New team members hired for both skill and cultural fit brought fresh energy and perspectives. Morgan, a graphic designer who had recently joined us from a competitor, often sought my input on projects. "The collaborative culture here is what attracted me," she told me during her first week. "My last job was so cutthroat, but everyone I interviewed with here talked about how ideas are valued regardless of title or tenure." I had taken on a mentorship role with our newest marketing specialist, Zoe, ensuring she received the support and inclusion I had been denied. Our weekly coffee meetings became a highlight for both of us, a chance to discuss challenges and share knowledge in a safe space. "I cannot imagine being treated the way you were," Zoe commented one day after I shared some of my experience. "Thank you for changing the culture before I got here." Her words reminded me that the impact of standing up to bullying extended far beyond my personal vindication. By refusing to quit or accept mistreatment, I had helped create an environment where others could thrive without fear. The healing process had not been instantaneous. For months after the investigation, I still experienced anxiety before team meetings, half expecting criticism or dismissal of my ideas. I found myself documenting everything out of habit, keeping email trails and notes that were no longer necessary in our transformed department. Patricia noticed this and gently encouraged me to begin trusting again, while respecting that workplace trauma takes time to overcome. My work continued to receive recognition both internally and from clients. The campaigns I developed consistently outperformed projections, and several clients specifically requested to work with me. My portfolio grew stronger, and with it, my professional confidence returned and expanded beyond pre-horizon levels. One particularly meaningful development was Global Innovation Partners, adopting several of my suggestions for preventing and addressing workplace bullying across all their subsidiaries. My experience had highlighted gaps in their existing policies, particularly around recognizing patterns of subtle sabotage and exclusion that could escalate to overt harassment. The new training program included specific examples of how seemingly minor behaviors could combine to create a hostile environment with clear guidance on intervention. Rebecca Martinez, whose similar experience had helped substantiate my case, contacted me with exciting news. After struggling to find employment for nearly a year following her departure from Horizon, she had been interviewed by Patricia and offered a position in our digital marketing team. "I never thought I would consider returning," she wrote, "but hearing about the changes made me willing to try." Her return represented a full-circle moment that validated the transformation of our workplace culture. I occasionally still encountered challenges in fully trusting new colleagues or speaking up in certain situations. The experience had left scars that were slow to fade. However, I worked with a therapist who specialized in workplace trauma, developing tools to distinguish between reasonable caution and limiting fear. Gradually, I found myself able to build authentic professional relationships again, approaching new team members with careful openness rather than defensive withdrawal. The most profound lesson from this experience was the power of strategic response versus emotional reaction. Had I quit in tears after the Loser sign incident as Jessica and her allies expected, nothing would have changed. The cycle would have continued with the next target, the toxic culture preserved intact. By documenting patterns, gathering evidence, and identifying the appropriate channel for addressing the harassment, I had not only resolved my personal situation, but catalyzed systemic change. This realization shaped how I approached other challenges in both professional and personal contexts. I became more deliberate, looking beyond immediate emotional responses to consider long-term outcomes and broader impacts. This was not about suppressing emotions, which were valid and important, but about channeling them into effective action rather than allowing them to dictate my choices. My experience also highlighted the critical importance of organizational leadership in setting and enforcing cultural standards. Jessica's behavior had continued and escalated because local leadership had enabled it either through active participation or passive acceptance. Global Innovation Partners' swift and decisive response, once they became aware, demonstrated how quickly toxic cultures could be transformed when those with authority took responsibility for workplace ethics. As I prepared for a presentation to our newest clients, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the humiliation of that loser sign to leading our most successful campaign, from isolation to mentorship, from victim to change agent, the path had been painful, but had led to growth and impact I could never have anticipated. Walking into our bright conference room, now filled with colleagues who respected each other and valued diverse perspectives, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was what a healthy workplace should feel like, the environment everyone deserved. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone who comes after you. Have you ever faced workplace bullying or known someone who has? I hope my story provides some guidance on documenting experiences and finding the right channels for addressing toxic behavior. Remember that strategic response is often more powerful than emotional reaction. If my experience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone and that there are effective ways to address bullying. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond when faced with injustice.